looking at the growing crisis in Niger, where the country's democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, was overthrown last week by his own presidential guard. The former president has been detained since Wednesday. Many of his top political allies have been arrested. Over the weekend, ECOWAS, the bloc of 15 West African nations, slapped sanctions on leaders of the coup and threatened to expel them by force unless they cede power within a week. This is ECOWAS President Omar Touré of Gambia.
In the event the authorities' demands are not met within 1 week, take all measures necessary to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. Such measures may include the use of force.
But 3 other African nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea, have warned that any military intervention in Niger would be seen as a declaration of war against them as well. The countries also warned that military intervention in Niger could destabilize the entire region, which has faced a spike in attacks from Islamic militants. A Burkina Faso government spokesperson made the announcement Monday.
We warn that any military intervention against Niger is tantamount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and Mali. We warn that any military intervention against Niger would entail a withdrawal of Burkina Faso and Mali from ECOWAS, as well as the adoption of self-defense measures in support of the armed forces and the people of Niger.
Niger is a former French colony which gained its independence in 1960. Over the weekend, Niger's new rulers accused France of plotting to intervene militarily. Niger is a major supplier of uranium to France and the European Union. France is planning to start evacuating French and European Union residents today. On Sunday, thousands of supporters of the new junta attempted to storm the French embassy in the capital, Niamey. Niger has also been a close ally to the United States. The U.S. has approximately 1,000 troops in Niger. Following the coup, the troops have been restricted to a U.S. military base in the northern city Agadez, where the U.S. spent over $100 million building a drone base. The Biden administration has so far refused to describe last week's event as a coup because doing so would force Washington to cut security aid to Niger. The Intercept reported last week that one of the leaders of last week's coup, Brigadier General Moussa Salou Barmou, who had been trained by the U.S. military at Fort Benning in Georgia. According to The Intercept, U.S.-trained military officers have taken part in 11 coups in West Africa since 2008, including in Burkina Faso and Mali. In Moscow, the Kremlin has described the situation in Niger as a, quote, cause for serious concern. But the head of the Russian mercenary group, Wagner, has reportedly welcomed the coup. Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has been quoted saying, "What happened in Niger is nothing other than the struggle of the people of Niger with their colonizers," unquote. To talk more about the crisis in Niger, we're joined by Stephanie Savelle. She's co-director of the Costs of War Project at Brown University's Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. She's an anthropologist who's researched U.S. militarism in West Africa and beyond. Professor Savelle, welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Can you start off by just explaining how this coup took place, the involvement of the Presidential Guard, et cetera?
Sure, yeah. On July 27th, the members of the Presidential Guard, so the President Mohamed Bazoum's own guard, detained the president and the spokesman for what they're calling the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, this is the name for the junta, declared that the Nigerian president was overthrown on national television, and that General Chiani, who oversees the Presidential Guard, declared he was leading a transitional government. So the exact reasons for the coup are actually still unclear. Chiani, he talked about the need to stop the country's demise, and he was referring to to the similar reasons for coups in neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali, because there's been so much insecurity, a huge rise of Islamist militant terror attacks, as you mentioned. And so he was saying that because the country is kind of spiraling into security, the military needed to step in. And so he was kind of the head of this council, and a bunch of senior military leaders stepped in to support him. What's confusing a little bit about his claim is that this region is a kind of hub for terror attacks. There have been over 1,800 in the first 6 months of the year, but only 77 deaths occurred in Niger, as opposed to out of about 4,600 in total in the region of Burkina Faso and Mali. So Niger has really managed to keep a lot of the attacks and the insecurity and the conflict to its border areas. It's been known to be a kind of bastion of stability and resilience in a region that's just been spiraling into chaos. So it is a perplexing claim on the part of General Chiani.
And could you talk to us about this rising presence of not only U.S. forces, but also other European troops in the country? Most Americans are not aware of this growing U.S. military presence in Africa.
Not at all. I was there in January, actually, and it was just shocking to me when I was in the airport how many foreigners I was seeing moving in and out of the country, which is a first for me in many years in West Africa. So over 1,000 U.S. service personnel are in Niger, but lots of other countries are also there. France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Canada at times has provided assistance. And a lot of these Western powers are really saw Niger as a, this kind of stable democracy, and were pouring security assistance, that is funding for military and police efforts, training efforts, a lot of weapons sales as well from the U.S. And elsewhere. So they're pouring all this security assistance to kind of bolster this so-called democracy. I went to Agadez to see the U.S. installation, the air base there. So it was $100 million where the U.S. spent on building this air base. It costs about $30 million a year to maintain. And it is a massive, sophisticated installation in the Sahara Desert. And the drones there, the US drones, are being used in the US counterterror operations, what we call the post 9/11 wars, in the surrounding desert area. So here it's strategically located in the middle of Algeria, Libya, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, Nigeria, Chad, that whole belt where we've seen this kind of growing unrest. The U.S. is right there conducting these, real operations. U.S. is also located at a couple of other bases in Niger in different parts of the country, with special operations forces, trainers that go in and out. So there's far more people actually than those official 1,000 troops. There's lots of people going in and out who are on short stays, and those don't even count towards the totals.
And you mentioned the coups and recent coups in Burkina Faso and Mali, but those were conducted, from what we understand, by people trained originally by the United States, officers trained by the United States. What do we know about the coup leaders in what is happening here?
So we do know that at least one of the coup leaders, General Barmou, or maybe not a general, but a colonel, he's, don't quote me on that. He was definitely trained by the U.S. military. I mean, I think we can look at this at an individual level. There are certainly arguments to be made that, U.S. training kind of empowers certain military leaders. But I think we also need to look at this as a structural issue. So what happens when the U.S. and other Western powers pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the security assistance sector? This is basically money for the military and the gendarmes, the police that also fight the insurgency. Is that the military is really boosted at the expense of other government institutions. A recent UNDP study showed that countries that have a oversized involvement of the military in political life and a very politicized military and a long history of military leadership in government, which Niger and a lot of these countries do, they're far more likely to have an ongoing pattern of military coups. So there's a lot of factors at stake that make a coup more likely, but certainly the U.S. pouring all of this money and this kind of outsized reliance on the military as a tool for aid to these countries is a contributing factor.
I wanted to just go back to that, who he is, the Intercept reporting that just last month, coup leader, and as you said, Brigadier General Moussa Salou-Barmou met with the head of U.S. Army Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Jonathan Braga, at the U.S. drone base in Niger. Also, Secretary of State Blinken was there. So if you could talk about the significance of this and also talk about uranium. When I saw all of this happening, I thought back to Joe Wilson's piece, the former State Department ambassador to Gabon, who in 2003, a few months after President George W. Bush invaded Iraq, wrote that famous New York Times op-ed